We are here to discuss the biggest television event of the season, the finale of Breaking Bad. It's been 24 hours. We've had some time to think it over. So let's get talking about it. I am Rob Gifford. I'm the diversions editor.
My name's Dan Appenfeller. I'm the managing editor.
I'm Ben Fraternelli, designer.
I'm Dean Essner. I'm a senior staff writer for Diversions.
And I'm Fuller Kennedy, online editor.
All right, so just starting off, what did you guys think? Were you satisfied? I was. I thought it was a great episode, one of the best finales you could have hoped for. But do you guys share that opinion? What do you think?
You know, I think it was a pretty tidy finale. I thought it was very straightforward. It covered up a lot of the potholes, tied up a lot of the loose ends I wanted to. And it wasn't offensive. I think a lot of these great shows of the past few years have had finales that may have ruined the show for a lot of people, and I don't think this did that.
Yeah, I thought the finale, like you said, was sort of perfectly scientific in a way that went along with how the show had been throughout its run. And just basically, the finale felt like a knot at the end, which is exactly what you want a finale to be, especially for a show like Breaking Bad. And yes, it didn't have these like huge emotional scenes, but that's kind of what Breaking Bad is. It's supposed to be sort of real and tied together nicely, I thought.
Yeah, Dan, the keyword you used that I liked was tidy. I think that it kind of showed that Vince Gilligan has been listening to fans and sort of drawing from what they are looking for and hoping for, because it's sort of like a summation of everything you could possibly want. It's kind of the closest thing to a happy ending. And while maybe you could, start talking about how there were some things that maybe in reference to the penultimate episode that weren't exactly like lining up perfectly in terms of tone and stuff like that, it really probably satisfied everyone at least in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, definitely. I loved it too, and like you guys said, it was real clean. There's no loose ends. There's not very many questions that you could ask now, and I think it did it for me emotionally too. I was spending commercial breaks. I was shaking. I was like, what's gonna happen next? And I like the fact that it kept that same level of, I guess what's the word I'm looking for? I was still just excited to watch it and to wait for it as I was for the whole season. I was just on the edge of my seat, so I loved it.
You brought up an interesting point in whether or not they were catering to fans. There wasn't any kind of crazy big twist or anything like, maybe something like Ozymandias had, the episode where Hank dies. But do you think that it was still shocking enough? Do you feel like it was a climax, or do you think that the last couple of episodes have been denouement and just kind of like, are you okay with that? Just kind of wrapping things up rather than notching things up another level until everything explodes.
I think you mentioned Hank's death, which ultimately that whole episode, and I think we had talked about this before, could be kind of like the climax of the show.
Yeah.
So anything past that is sort of just we're getting a very concrete picture of the way things are going to wrap up, and they're really, while I guess there were so many different possibilities and theories of how the show could end, everything that happened was within reason. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a twist or a surprise as much as just Vince Gilligan sort of like it was a possibility that the show would shape up like this, and it did. So
one thing that I've heard a few people complain about was that Walt didn't go out like a badass, they thought. Do you think that's a fair reading of the show at all?
I have my own personal qualms with that whole reading of the show. I think a lot of people in literature and television and movies say there's no wrong way to read it. But I think people who watch this show with the expectation of it being an action movie surrounding its action protagonist, Walter White, being a badass, I think that's the wrong way to watch Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
And I think Walt got what he deserved, which is very apparent in the music that Vince Gilligan chose. And I'm glad he died. And honestly, if taking out a room full of Nazis with a machine gun isn't badass enough for you, I don't know what you're expecting. So.
Yeah, as far as like exciting climaxes go, I think it's important to think of this season of Breaking Bad, maybe more than any other season, as like a perfect 8-episode conclusion, rather than we're looking for one episode at the end to sort of figure everything out for us. Like, definitely more than any show, the final 8 episodes, to me, were just gripping. Every episode literally started where the previous one ended, and it was one string of a fantastic story And I agree, you shouldn't be going into it thinking, I want Walt to be a badass and go out with a big explosion. I thought there was an explosive scene, and he died in sort of like a poetic way, the perfect way, the way the show laid it out.
Yeah, I think that AMC certainly does use the Kubrickian model of stutter stepping, and then smacking you in the face with something that's triumphant and not triumphant, surprising and crazy that you'd never expected. And I think I totally agree with you in the sense that it wasn't all culminating in the final episode. It was it wasn't a race to the finish. It was kind of just, this is how the story is going to unfold. It's going to be it's an arc. It's not necessarily just suspense until the end. And it's just it's a story.
I mean, we did have one of those huge, crazy, explosive episodes when Hank died and he steals the baby, and
right.
It's just it happened a couple episodes earlier because unlike season 4 where everything culminates in the last couple of scenes with him killing Gus, you have after season 4 you had a whole other season to wrap that all up.
Right.
Whereas with this you still need to wrap things up after the climax, but you don't have there's no extra time after that. So climax had to come kind of a couple episodes early for them to work it all out.
Exactly.
But I was still very happy with the way it went down, with Walt actually trying to find some kind of redemption at the end. Do you think it's possible for him to achieve any kind of redemption, or
I don't think so.
What do you think of the way he went out?
No way. I think in the end, Walt is always serving his ego, and he was never really. He's not really sorry, and I guess he thinks that he's fixing everything. He's gonna go back and he's gonna fix it. He's gonna give Jesse a chance to kill him and all that. But in the end, I think there's just no going back. Since season 2 he did it for me. Since season 2 when he let Jane die, I think that was his breaking point for me. And there's no going back for him. You can't.
And I think there's a great illustration of that in this episode. There were a couple even. I mean, the very first thing that they start wrapping up is with Gretchen and Elliot Schwartz, former partners of Walt's, and he's just an entire villain. He's no longer the anti-hero. He is the villain in that scene. He's outwardly villainous. He threatens to kill them, and then he goes to see Skylar later on, and there's this wonderful back and forth where it sounds like he's trying to justify his actions again. He says, "I did this but he says, I did it for myself," and he says, "This is all about me," and it always was. So I don't even think the show is trying to offer him any redemption, regardless of what he wraps up.
But at least he dies being honest with himself and does what he can to clean up his mess by killing Lydia and the Nazis. So, I mean, I think that counts for something. I don't think he's redeemed, but I think that he died with some dignity, which is more than I would have expected given what's been going on in the show the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, I like the way it ended in that it was his last plan. Waltz had several big plans throughout the show, and some have succeeded, some have failed, but they always served himself. But this plan succeeded in the end, and he died, and at least it served to, like you said, clean up a mess and help people. And some people don't really like that he sort of, he went out in sort of a noble way, even though it's like the most dark, noble way possible. But still, he went out doing something good for once and succeeding in his plan.
The funny thing is that Walt he's so calculating. He's always thinking about things. But I think the funny thing is the way I read it was that he killed himself. That wasn't part of his plan. I don't think.
Yeah, that's true.
He was shot by
a ricochet.
Yeah.
And I think that I guess maybe that was another slap in the face for Ward. That was another kind of shot at him. You're so calculated, and you're always thinking about these things, but you weren't.
There's always one thing you can't plan.
It's nice to see that one little twist of fate was what ultimately got him. He didn't get to go out entirely on his own terms, because I've heard some complaints. I was talking to my brother the other day, or I guess today, about it, and he said, I don't like that Walt won, but the fact that it was a ricochet, like a slight chance of fate that ended up getting him, doesn't. He couldn't go out on his own.
I don't know if I would say he won. He still died on the floor of a Nazi meth lab.
Right, but I mean, the way the final scene was framed with him sort of, I guess, just touching all of his meth, which is not even his equipment. No. I should also mention.
Yeah.
But he he doesn't. He in some way, I guess, I think that he died with the thing that was closest to him.
Yeah, you see him touching that, the equipment. It's like goodbye, old friend, almost.
Yeah.
What about Jesse? Are we all happy for Jesse?
Happy?
Happy? I mean, again, this is like happy ending within the context of this horribly awful, depressing show. Like that's you get.
I'm happy you got to kill Todd. I'm glad you got that from. But other than that, I don't really.
I hate Todd.
It's really weird.
Does anyone like Todd?
I like Todd.
The actor from like.
I mean, with Jesse, you got to give credit to Aaron Paul, because that last shot when he's driving out and it's like this
Oh my
weird
God,
combination of triumph but like total mental destruction.
Mhm.
He's just a broken individual. And I love that the show was able to give us some tweak of ambiguity, so we can go out saying like,
Maybe he went back to Brock.
yeah, Jonathan Banks said on AMC's Talking Bad last night that he went back to Brock, but or he could have gone and smoked a lot of meth and ended up right where he started.
Who knows? Any final thoughts?
Science.
Science. Magnets. All right.
Chemistry.
All right, there you have it. That's what we think of the Breaking Bad finale. Hope you enjoyed it. Bon voyage.